Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is Human Settlements Planning. The topic we will be further delving into is urban planning and urban renewal. In this chapter, we will be looking into zoning regulations, zonal plan, PUD. We will start with regional planning. Regional planning is a category of planning and development that deals with designing and placing infrastructure and other suitable elements across a larger area within a city. Regional planning zones may encompass several towns, cities, or even parts of different states, each of which could have their own planning offices in the realm of urban planning. If you look at the planning regions of Tamil Nadu, Madras Metropolitan Region, this area is covered by Chengalpet district, the Palar Basin in the North Arcot district. In Vellore region, you have the remaining parts of the North Arcot district. South Arcot region including Kadalur, Neyveli Lignite are Ponniyar Basin. Then you have the Salem region, you have the Coimbatore region, Nilgiris region, Tiruchirappalli, Tanjavur region across the Kaveri Delta. Finally, you have Madurai region and Tirunelveli region including Kanyakumari. So, these are the planning regions encompassing the state of Tamil Nadu. Similar to this, every state has its own regionals and regional planning commissions set across every state, encompassing the entire state comprising of districts, cities as well as other metropolitan areas. Now, within these subdivision regulations, earlier in every city much land is either vacant or inefficiently used. So, there is always a speculative prospect. As time changes, as needs change, there is always a sense of what else can be done to that vacant land, or if that particular use has become obsolete, what can replace that building. So, various methods have been proposed to emphasize taxation on land. Necessity for regulations over subdivision of urban land was urgent, since use and development of land constitute a right bestowed by the community upon the individual, and this right may be withdrawn if he violates the conditions. Subdivision and layout. A piece of land divided into more than 8 parcels, each of which is going to be sold separately, is called a layout, whereas less than or equal to 8 divisions is called a subdivision of land. So, many interests are involved when the land is being sold. To the land developer, the subdividing of land is primarily a matter of profit. To the community, it is a matter of public concern. Activities determine the quality of living. Where such activities are uncontrolled, they place a huge burden on the public treasury. So, you have excessive cost of public improvements, maintenance, and increase in cost of service provisions that need to be made for the land and ancillary related problems. Transforming the city plan into a reality. Many elements in the overall plan are realized at the time the land is developed. Highways, streets, alleys, sewers, water lines, power lines, schools, transportation, fire, police, this list goes on. The city plan is either realized or is lost in the subdivision of land. So, when land is being subdivided, it cannot be done without any thought process of how exactly this is going to work only economically. It has to have a lot of other considerations that go into this. Subdivision procedure, land is surveyed. Officials' records are consulted as well as proposed. Highways, special easements, right of way, all that is looked into. Amenities such as cultural and social facilities. You have to refer to subdivision ordinances. Planner or engineers to prepare preliminary plan, which includes the size, shape, number of lots, location of streets, radii, turning radii of roads, drainage, utilities, etc. So, how the subdivision process goes about. Next, an estimate is prepared. What is going to be the relative cost of development? Tentative map is filed with a local planning agency, so approval can be obtained such that incorporate suggestions are made, if any, and then are resubmitted. So, if the approval is not going to happen in the first phase, tentative suggestions are made and these changes have to be incorporated and resubmitted, and the procedure starts again from the first step. Now, if you go about looking at the procedure of zoning, what exactly does zoning do? Zoning is a device of land use regulation used by local governments in most developed countries. The word is derived from the practice of designating permitted uses of land based on mapped zones which separate one set of land use from another. Theoretically, the primary purpose of zoning is to segregate uses that are thought to be incompatible. In practice, zoning is used to prevent new development from interfering with existing residents or businesses and to preserve the character of a community. So, the zoning, what it actually does is to prevent the mix of uses which will alter the quality of a particular area. Now, if you look in an area like Arepuram, Abhiramapuram, they are considered predominantly residential areas. Now, if I go put a major mall in the midst of this, it changes the entire traffic pattern. That area could be used to only single movement vehicles or maximum pedestrian vehicles. But if I am going to have a mall in that area now, the entire traffic pattern will change, the typology of crowd will change, the demographics of that area will change. So, by changing the zoning of a particular area, it could have a series of repercussions which cannot be controlled. So, it is very important in the stage of zoning that everything is done impeccably, and even if it is going to be a mixed use area, it is done within certain limitations, keeping in mind the built infrastructure that is going to support this structure. Zoning may include regulation of the kinds of activities which will be acceptable on certain lots, such as open space, or is it going to be residential, commercial or industrial. The densities at which those activities can be performed, from low density housing such as single family homes to high densities such as high rise apartment buildings. The height of the buildings, the amount of space structures may occupy, the location of a building on the lot, that is the setbacks. From the road, how far is the distance going to be to the building? Will there be adequate space? The proportions of the types of space on a lot, such as how much landscaped space, impervious surface, traffic lanes and parking must be provided. So, impervious surface is required because if you are going to have a landscaped area, that is considered an open space which will provide for water absorption and rainwater harvesting. If it is going to be concreted roads and impervious surface, that will add on to the percentage of a built up area, which will give everyone and especially the city an idea of what is the lung area or lung space ratio to that of the built up area. Most zoning systems have a procedure for granting variances. Exceptions, variances are nothing but exceptions to the zoning rules, usually because of some perceived hardship caused by the particular nature of property in question. So, the prime example for this is Pondi Bazaar and the Usman Road. If you look at it, all of these tall buildings that are built which are required by the commercial district in that area, but there is no adequate parking, no setbacks, all the shops abut the roads. So, all of these are granted after variances, because in that area, because of lack of space, certain permissions are granted because for those commercial activities to continue, because if those commercial activities are removed, the area will become redundant and the commercial value and the land value will completely plummet. Basically, urban zones fall into one of 5 major categories. So, you have residential uses, mixed residential commercial, commercial uses, industrial and special. So, special encompasses power plants, sports complexes, airports, shopping malls, etc. Now, if you look at the zoning types, zoning codes have evolved over the years as urban planning theory has changed, legal constraints have fluctuated and political priorities have shifted. The various approaches to zoning can be divided into 4 broad categories. You have Euclidean, performance based, incentive and finally design based. Now, if you look at standard Euclidean, it is also referred to as the building block zoning. This is characterized by segregation of land uses into specified geographic districts and dimensional standards stipulating limitations on the magnitude of development activity that is allowed to take place on lots within each type of district. So, this is a very standard way of zoning or type of zoning. In this, uses within each district are usually heavily prescribed to exclude other types of uses. So, residential layouts will completely disallow any commercial or industrial uses. So, a sense of mixed use is very limited in this scenario. Some accessory or conditional uses may be allowed in order to accommodate the needs of the primary uses. So, this is what a typically residential layout, if you look at, will have one provision store, one grocery store or one vegetable market. So, all of this is added to aid in the primary use of residential layout that it's primarily meant to be. If this was not there, there would be a complete influx of traffic and services that are required to support this need. So, to avoid that, usually basic commercial activities will be provided along with the primary use. Now, if you look at standard Euclidean, what are the standards apply? Dimensional standards apply to any structures built on lots within each zoning district and typically take the form of setbacks, height limitations, minimum lot sizes, lot coverage limits and other limitations on the building envelope. Euclidean zoning is utilized by some municipalities because of its relative effectiveness, ease of implementation, that is, you have one set of explicit prescriptive rules, long established legal precedent and familiarity to planners and design professionals. Euclidean 2 is another type of zoning. In this, zoning uses traditional Euclidean zoning classification like we just discussed, industrial, commercial, multifamily, residential, but a small changes but places them in a hierarchical order or nesting order which makes one zoning class within another similar. So, there is a hierarchical order that is placed in this. For example, multifamily is not only permitted in the higher order and multifamily zoning districts, but also permitted in high order commercial and industrial zoning districts as well. Protection of land values is maintained by stratifying the zoning districts into levels according to their location in the urban society. So, neighborhood, community, municipality and region. This is the hierarchy of neighborhood location in urban society. Now, the next type of zoning is performance zoning, also known as effects based planning. Performance zoning uses performance based or goal oriented criteria to establish or review parameters for proposed development projects in any area of the municipality. Performance zoning often utilizes points based system whereby a property developer can apply credits towards meeting established zoning goals through selecting from a menu of compliance options. So, some examples are mitigation of environmental impacts, providing public amenities or building affordable housing. So, these are certain examples of compliance options. The appeal of performance zoning lies in its high level of flexibility, rationality, transparency and accountability. Performance zoning can be extremely difficult to implement and can require a high level of discretionary activity on part of the supervising authority. And that is one of the negative aspects of this, because as governments change, and because it is going to be a very subjective of the superior authority who is going to overlook this, this could constantly change. The zoning could constantly change. So, that is one of the limitations of performance zoning. Now, finally, if you look at incentive zoning, this is intended to provide a reward based system to encourage development that meets established urban development goals. Typically, a base level of prescriptive limitations on development will be established. An extensive list of incentive criteria will be established for developers to adopt or not, and this is not left to their discretion. So, this is not subjective, and this is where it is differentiating from the performance based zoning. A reward scale is connected to the incentive criteria, which provides an enticement for developers to incorporate the desired development criteria into their projects. Now, common examples include FAR, that is floor area ratio, bonuses for affordable housing provided on site, height limit bonuses for inclusion of public amenities on site. Incentive zoning allows for a higher degree of flexibility, but it can be complex to the administer. The more a proposed development takes advantage of incentive criteria, the more closely it has to be reviewed on a discretionary basis. So, what are the bases you are going to give these incentives on? There is a list certain that is pertaining to it, but what if a particular project checks on everything on that list? This incentives goes on adding, and again discretionary basis of a superior authority comes into question, because an incentive zoning is usually preferred when it is going to be one or two incentives, but in sometimes developers in the greed to show that they want all the incentives could actually on paper have a lot of other incentive requirements fulfilled, but in reality, in ground reality, when the project takes off, those might necessarily not be there. So, constantly a person from the planning authority has to keep an eye on this project to ensure that what all incentives are given, what all theories it is going to be based on, all of that is implemented and successfully implemented for enjoying those incentives provided by the planning authorities. Now, form based zoning. Form based zoning regulates not the type of land use, but the form that the land use may take. For instance, form based zoning in a dense area may insist on low setbacks, high density and pedestrian accessibility amongst other things. Form based zoning may also specify desirable design features. However, when form based codes do not contain appropriate illustrations and diagrams, they have been criticized as being difficult to interpret. As another example, in a largely suburban single family residential area, uses such as offices, retail or even light industrial outputs are permitted such that they are conformed. That is, the setback is within the building size, lot coverage, height and other factors and other things that are going to be pertaining with the existing development of that particular area. Now, we will move on to the relationship between a zonal plan and a master plan. If you look at a zonal plan or nothing but a divisional plan, it details out the policy of a master plan and acts as a link between the layout and the master plan. The development schemes, the layout plans indicating uses, premises should conform to the main master plan or the divisional plan. Indian master plan approach was fundamentally guided by the British town planning legislations. And further integrating the Western concept of zoning into the master planning led to the preparation of new lower hierarchy development plans called zonal development plan, handling more comprehensive and more focused subjects derived from the master plan. As we have seen, a master plan is prepared for every 20 to 25 years, and so by the time all the data related to that is collected, it could become obsolete. That's when a Western concept of introducing a lower hierarchy of a zonal development plan came into being. So, a zonal development plan obviously has to be in cohesion with the main master plan, but the master plan document will be the mother document or the main document. It is based on this that these zonal plans are prepared and not vice versa. Zonal development plans are the next level hierarchical policy plans after the master plans, which detail out the broad objectives of the master plan at a comparatively smaller region, while incorporating the guidelines and the proposals by the master plan without deviating far from the primary goal of development set by the master plan. Unlike master plans, here these zonal plans are prepared for shorter terms with a lot more focus on detailing and just not looking at the bigger picture. As the city in its initial stage of growth, there is urban agglomeration taking place into the city, which usually is derived due to one or few unique characteristics spreading almost homogeneous throughout the city. But as the city keeps growing bigger, there are different new characteristics brushed without the prior knowledge on different aspects of the city which are holding a huge population. This arises new problems with solutions generally out of the scope of the single character oriented master plans, which treats the whole city equal and develops the regulations based on the common or prominent character of the city with major aspects in detail. Also, it is impossible to advocate these changes into the master plan due to its long-term visionary approach. So, when you look at a zonal plan, there are lots of changes that occur with time. As we just saw, zonal plan is done for a shorter period of time, unlike the master plan. So, when you are looking at a projection for a shorter period of time, there could be changes that are anticipated, say 2 years from now or 3 years from now. But to adapt these changes into a master plan which is made for 2 decades or 2.5 decades, that is obviously going to require long-term visionary approach and cannot be done overnight. At this point, the authorities have come up with such inspiring solutions of preparation of separate development plans for different smaller regions called zones, which are divided based on the broad prevailing character of that area. Now, having an opportunity of independent planning for each zone, these zonal development plans put their focus on these sub-objectives developed according to the uniqueness of the zones. So, as the changes happen in every zone and you realize that every change cannot be adapted into the master plan and each zone is unique in its own way, what has happened over time is a lot more power has been given into these zonal development plans. So, for a shorter period of time, if zonal development plans are developed and are focused in such a way that those changes can be brought about, but as far as they are updated in the master plan, it is sufficient. Because you can't keep going back into a document that is obsolete, which has been prepared 20 years ago or 25 years ago and expect those zonal changes to be made appropriately. So, a zonal development plan has received a lot more importance over a period of time in the recent years, because it has been realized that if we keep depending on the master plan and the changes that are going to be incorporated in the master plan, it will be a very slow process. Coming to the question of the legality of the zonal development plans, both the zonal plans as well as the master plans are approved and authorized equally by the state governments, and any changes or amendments that are directed only towards the statutory master plan which reflects those changes will be taken into the consideration. So, any changes in the zonal plan might not be changed accordingly. It might be taken into implementation, but regardless of that, it might not be changed in the main master plan. The zonal development plan contains the detailed land use plan for the purposes of roads, housing, school, recreation, hospitals, industry, markets, business places, public utilities and other such categories. Most development authorities prefer the development of these zonal plans simultaneously with the preparation of the master plans to provide immediate aid as a tool to the master plan implementation at ground level. So, that is the most required thing. Yes, you obviously want your zonal plan and your master plan to go hand in hand, but it necessarily needn't happen in every case, and your zonal plan obviously has to be kept up to date with the changes that are occurring with respect to that zone. That is the main advantage of having a zonal plan. It is for a smaller period of time, it is for a smaller area. So, any changes or surveys that are done can be incorporated in an easier fashion, the information can be implemented in a better fashion. So, the master plan can be a guiding document, but the zonal plan will have to be your implementation plan. Now, we will move on to a planned unit development, or otherwise usually referred to as PUD. What is this? It is actually a type of building development and also a regulatory process. As a building development, it is design grouping of both varied and compatible land uses such as housing, recreation, commercial centers, industrial parks, all within one contained development or subdivision. The origins of PUDs is in the new American communities can be traced to the British movements during the 1950s. The developments in the Britain's new communities dealt with the locations of industrial elements and how they were publicly dictated before building ever began in order to uphold an economic base. However, in America, privately controlled communities often had to attract the industry after residential sectors had been built and occupied. The oldest forms of PUDs in America appeared shortly after World War II in the Levittowns and Park Forest developments as entire communities within these limits and orbits of large metropolitan centers. The first zoning evidence of PUD was created by Prince George's County, Maryland in 1949. It permitted the development of a large tract of land as a complete neighborhood unit, having a range of dwelling types, the necessary local shopping facilities and off-street parking areas, parks, playgrounds, school sites and other community facilities. PUD is treated also as a regulatory process as a means of land regulation which promotes large-scale, unified land developments by means of mid-range, realistic programs in case of physically curable social, economic deficiencies in both the land and the cityscapes. Where appropriate, this development control can promote both a mixture of land uses and dwelling types, with at least one of the land uses being regional in nature, the clustering of residential land uses providing public as well as common open space, increased administrative discretion to a local professional planning staff while settling aside present land use regulations and rigid approval processes. The enhancement of the bargaining process between the developer and the government municipalities, which in turn strengthens and the municipality site plan review and control over development for potentially increased profits due to land efficiency, multiple land uses and increased residential densities. Now, if you look at the PUDs which are usually taken upon now in the recent times, they take on a variety of forms ranging from small clusters of houses combined with open spaces to new and developing towns with thousands of residents from various land uses. However, the definition of a PUD does not take into consideration these types of developments unless they fit into a category of size ranging from 100 to 200 acres. In a PUD, the property owner owns the land dwelling sits on it. So, it does not have to be rented, and if the property owner owns the land, he even owns the construction site that sits on it. Now, at the end of this lecture, we have studied zoning regulations, zonal plan as well as a planned unit of development or PUD. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. What are the types of zoning? What is regional planning? What is a zonal plan? What are the differences between a master plan and a zonal plan? And what is the link between a master plan and a zonal plan? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.